And welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Plek. So excited to have all of you joining us from all over the globe. We're an international podcast, as you all know. And joining me in studio is none other than Pastor Holland Grieg from Eastside Community Church, one of my favorite pastors. Holland, welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much.
You know, and also from the Cody Sparks band, Mr. Cody Sparks. How you doing?
So super. Well, Jordan Smith. Doing great, Chris. How are you doing?
Yeah, that's good. A little pep in the step, never hurt anybody. Listen, I got a question in, and I'd love for you guys to take this one and really help me. As we all know, Kalor, I think, is coming to a men's group tonight, which I'm excited about. Kalor's talked about his transition from being a homosexual that was engaged to be married to being celibate, following Jesus, heading for ministry, and because he's been convicted by his lifestyle and by God's word and by the community that his sin is to be repented from, and he has. And so when we talked about some of the struggles he's had as a Christian, and one of our great listeners, like we have some incredible listeners out there, and I want to thank this particular one who sent this question. After listening to the podcast with Kalor talks about finding male mentors. However, if someone is attracted to males and trying not to be, would it be wise to seek out males? I figure things are often separated into male and female, assuming that most folks are heterosexual, trying to eliminate the messiness and the complication of sexual attraction. Thinking about these dynamics as a married female who has a husband who is far from God, who has invited a male to come to church. Okay, so this female has invited a male to come to church, and she's wondering if Kalor should not be investing in dudes, but be investing in ladies, so there isn't this unnecessary sexual attraction with a man.
What's the difference in her wanting to bring a guy?
I guess the question she's having is...
Well, I'm attracted to women, and if I were to go and say, hey, I want to invite you to church, and you can come with me and my family, I guess I would say. But I mean,
she's not bringing her husband doesn't go to church.
Right.
And, so I think that's where the complication goes. I think there's several layers here. So let's first jump on layer one. Should Kalor, and we'll have to talk to Kalor about this tonight, but should Kalor be seeking out female mentors as opposed to male mentors as a Christian who has struggled with homosexuality in the past, but moving forward is wanting to be a celibate man of God and ultimately hopes that God changes his heart to be attracted to women? Wouldn't it be, she's wondering, is it wise for him, the better solution for him is to have female mentors and that kind of thing? Your thoughts on that, Holland?
Good question. So I think there's like a lot that goes into this that I think needs to be talked about before we even get to it.
Yeah, we can do it back
because like for me,
origin stories.
I think the categories of heterosexual and homosexual are actually not biblical categories.
Right.
In terms of who you are as a person.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible talks about men who practice homosexuality, not homosexuals.
Right.
The way that category of someone being homosexual or being heterosexual is a modern, secular, psychological way of speaking, like Sigmund Freud, his contemporaries within the last 100 years.
Right.
And so the Bible would not say that someone is a homosexual in terms of like they have the idea of a homosexual orientation. That's all like modern pop psychology stuff.
The word gender was made up in the 50s.
Yeah. And so the gender identity and orientation, none of this stuff is biblical categories.
Right.
And so we shouldn't see ourselves as homosexual or heterosexual. We should see ourselves simply as what the Bible says, male or female.
Right.
Yep.
And male being made for female and female being made for male. Those are the biblical categories. So for someone who's like, okay, well, I've struggled with same-sex attraction, you're not a homosexual. You are so for Kalor, you are a male who has some disordered desires.
Yep.
And by the grace of God, he can change our hearts and our desires. But what you don't need to say like, oh, I'm a different category of person that needs a different type of this or that. I think that's important is to say, I'm a male, I've struggled with these desires, every male struggles with disordered desires in some way or another. Some that are just sinful, some that are unnatural, whatever it may be. And so the idea of saying, okay, should he seek a female mentor because he's had this? I don't think so.
I agree.
I think he should instead seek to cultivate right desires and healthy male relationships within a church community where he has brotherhood, he has spiritual fatherhood, and one day we'll have spiritual sons that he's discipling and mentoring. But he needs to form healthy male friendships and relationships.
I agree with you on this.
Healthy male friendships, I think, is actually the answer to a lot of this, because if you've had unhealthy male relationships, it might be furthering your fear of them and the greater attraction to them. And let's just go from I'm going to use, I feel like I'm, Paul, using your language, a heterosexual person with a man with an older woman who's like a grandma. For the most part, there isn't a sexual attraction there. Like, that's someone that's like, hey, I've got wisdom for you in this area or whatever. And you wouldn't ever think there's a weird sexual thing. Like, we work with lots of women in the church, and I'm not sitting there going like, I wonder if she's into me, right? Like, I think that's...
Yeah, that's good.
Right. Like, so you wouldn't... Or like, as a pastor, I'm talking to women all the time, and and it's weird now to be almost 50. It's wild. And they're like 20-something-year-olds.
You are
20-something-year-olds that look at me like I'm their dad.
Yeah.
And I've, as I'm entering into this new phase of life, like we just did a baptism video for a 22-year-old, and like I would have been 25 when she was born.
Yeah,
which
it's
is
weird.
Crazy. Anyway, so like,
because in your head, you're like, yeah, we're the same age. We're all just young people.
And she's looking at me like I might as well have a cane and I'm about to die, right? Like, and so I don't think that she has any like worry, unless I'm sure that there are other relationships like that we've seen out in the world.
It's possible, but
for the most part,
correct.
She's looking at me more like a dad figure, and I'm like communicating with her on that level, and so I don't think there's any weirdness about that. So at the same time, so with Kalor, I would say like he needs a man, and to be fair, like I guess he's 20. He's like, I'm like 22 years older than him. And so I think at some point he needs a man like me or an older guy that could speak into his life and challenge him on the things where he's not looking at me as like, maybe I'll get in a relationship with him, but rather someone who challenge me.
Well, that's the thing. She said mentor, define mentor.
Yeah.
So it's somebody that you're using to gain knowledge and gain,
or someone to walk you through discipleship,
that's what correct.
You're accountable,
exactly.
all of those things.
So you're walking with life through that person, and you're getting advice. So for me, I agree with you both that he needs someone more of a leader that would say, hey, this is how you do things as a man, or this is what we do.
Yeah. So I think we're all in agreement on that. Do any Bible verses stick out to you on that?
I think about 1 Timothy 5, I think it is, where he says, don't rebuke an older man, but encourage him as a father, older women as mothers, younger men as brothers, younger women as sisters in all purity.
Yeah.
And so Paul is laying out for Timothy a familial way of thinking about church relationships and saying, you need fathers and brothers, and you need mothers and sisters.
Right.
And so for him, also, like, do I think he needs to be mentored by a woman? No. But do I think he needs healthy female relationships in the church? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I like Titus 2. Older women likewise are to exhibit behavior fitting for those who are holy, not slandering, not slaves, excessive drinking, but teaching what is good. Yep. In this way, they will train the younger women to love their husbands, love their children, to be self-controlled, pure, fulfilling their duties at home, kind, being subject to their own husbands, so that the message of God may not be discredited, which is the one that women everywhere either love or hate, actually. But yeah, so I do feel like that's a powerful point of like, you need same-sex relationships, I think, to spur you on in some ways, because and you need to grow through them, and they're going to help you grow in whatever your sin struggle is.
And the question, I think this person's asking is like, okay, is there a danger though of him having close male relationships, if that's the thing? Just like it's like, you wouldn't be like, hey, Cody, go do one-on-one discipleship with some young woman, just you and her, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That is just not wise. And so
no, you're putting yourself in that position. Yeah.
Yeah.
agree.
And so, I think that question coming from that, but just saying like, that's where a mentoring relationship of an older man, but also encouraging him to have, and again, we're using him as an example, but this principle more generally, to have healthy male friendships and
set boundaries.
Set boundaries, be open, confess sin, repent from it, and expect freedom.
Yeah.
Like
I
you
just
should.
think of, Erin, your wife, Erin, had a girls' night, and they started talking to this one dude that was in the military, and then she texted me and said, "Hey, I can't remember his name. Hey, you guys are both veterans, military background. He'd be a great person to kind of get." And I really appreciate it. Like that was like she did, she ministered in the moment to that guy, and then she sort of
passed it on. She did exactly what she needed to do.
Yeah, and it was really.
And I was actually kind of like mind blown and impressed and confused at the same time.
It was interesting. I was like, wow, that's kind of wild. Anyway, but I do feel like, so let's get into this specific question, because this woman she has a husband who is far from God. And I don't know if the person that she's invited to church is a male that has homosexual attraction. So she feels like, oh, I guess I'm the answer to this guy's struggle, because I'm married and it's not a big deal. And I don't see anything, whatever. And I would say, like, yeah, invite him to church. But I would have some sort of boundary emotionally. And obviously, I think physical probably might not be the hard part. The emotional boundary goes both ways. And because you can't, just because someone is like, in your eyes, homosexual, it doesn't mean God's not going to rearrange their desire. Feelings come and go.
Like we're attracted to like women, and I'm not going to pray that I don't want to be attracted to that, but I'm married. I'm not going to cross that line.
Right.
I don't look at that way.
Right.
But if you're not putting up boundaries and guarding your heart and doing all those things, you could easily fall.
Sure. And
very
that's
quickly.
Exactly. And I think this question, the lady asking the question, she's invited a male to come to church. That's a big win. You should do that. You should, when you're looking to bless your neighbors, bless your coworkers, bless the people in your neighborhood, that's a great thing to do. It's just, I'm not gonna say it's dangerous. I want to be like dun dun dun, but I do think the wise person, you build a web of relationship, and you can only go so far with a person of the opposite sex and not dishonor your husband.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, but I do love the question, and I think it's something that, as our culture becomes more progressive, I guess, where there's more and more men who are at home and more women in the workplace, and that can get confusing. And so I think there's got to be some wisdom that we lay down as people who are meeting you right where you're at, but sort of challenge you to kind of go back to, I don't want to say it's going back to more traditional roles, but going to biblical roles that God has instituted for men and women, and being a difference and a light in a culture that is so dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Any other thoughts on any of that?
Not that question.
Yeah.
I would say just like, especially, if your husband's far from God and there's a barrier there, you really don't want to be building close friendships with other men, and, hand that off. Mm-hmm. So, hey, invite a church. Hey, here's Cody. Here's
But what if
Chris.
that guy is struggling with homosexuality?
I think that becomes an extra thing, right?
So then it's like, well, there's no like real type of romance ever.
Sure, but I do think
it's
again, I think there's a guarding the heart both ways.
Yep.
And there's a certain part of, I don't know how to put this, but you want to honor your spouse, even though your spouse may not care, and all that. There's a certain honoring of your spouse. I think Adrian, probably one of the things I grew the most in, from my being single, being married, there's a certain amount of, I used to, this is so bad. My mom would always say, give him a thrill, Chris, and so make a girl feel good. And I learned early on that when I gave a girl a thrill, even if there was like no chance or whatever, it was not honoring to Adrian. And so I quickly learned over time that there's a certain way to interact with the opposite sex that is honoring to your spouse. And I think that's the part where I think some people really need to grow in to really experience the fullness that God has for us. Anyway. All right. Any other thoughts
good.
on that? Okay. Hey, listen, thanks so much for watching. Again, we want to answer all your questions, so make sure you send them in. Text in at 737-231-0605 or go to pastorplek.com and leave a message for us there. We talk faith, culture, and everything in between. We'd love to hear from you. From our house to yours, have an awesome week of worship.
Nailed it.